Well, good morning, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to Evenbreak Explores. This is a series of events that we put on for employers, for talent acquisition professionals, HR professionals, anybody who's interested in disability in the workplace, which really should be everybody. And every time we have one of these events, we bring in a special guest who is an expert in a particular area around this, and we have a conversation. So it's very informal. There's no PowerPoints, there's no agenda as such, and we want you to join in. So if you have any comments or questions or any stories you want to share or any examples, or if we're saying something you don't agree with, pop it in the chat or in the questions or wherever, and we'll address them, because we don't want it just to be us talking, but we want to hear your stories as well. And we have Karen here. Welcome, Karen, who is our BSL interpreter. I don't think anybody's asked for a BSL interpreter, but we like to demonstrate good practice. So if ever we do events, we have a BSL interpreter and a live captioner. So Denise is also here doing the live captions, so you can switch those on and follow as well. We like to do it this way so that people don't necessarily have to say, oh, I need this or I need that. Obviously, if somebody needs something different over and above, we would arrange for that to happen as well. But I think as a default, we should have basic accessibility on all of our events, just to show that that's fairly easy to do and also very good practice, and means that we can reach more people, which is really what inclusion and accessibility is all about. So today we're talking about inclusive recruitment, and I'm absolutely delighted to have the very wonderful Tracey Abbott with us.
Thank you very much, Jane. Lovely to be here.
So Tracey and I have known each other now for quite a long time, probably since as long as Evenbreak has existed. So that's around 10 years.
Yeah.
And I first met you, Tracey, when you were working for Business Disability Forum. And you've done lots of other exciting things since then, and you work at Microlink now. But I just wondered if you wanted to perhaps tell us a bit about how you got into the whole world of disability and inclusion.
I think it's the way that most people do. I had a car crash that resulted in me acquiring a number of disabilities. And up to the point of the car crash, I was, young for a start, but was fairly fit, did a lot of athletics, did a lot of horse riding, lots of outdoor pursuits and things like that. The crash was pretty traumatic, and I finished up with soft brain tissue damage, and acquired stammer, diabetes, problem with my heart, and various other bits and pieces. And I actually had to take about a year off work just to get myself back together again, both mentally and physically. And I was fortunate enough to come across Susan Scott Parker, who was the CEO at the time of Business Disability Forum. And she needed somebody to work on recruitment and actually look at the barriers that are in the recruitment process. And we understand that most of them are completely unintentional, but they're baked in. They've been in there for years, and people don't really like looking at changing them. And it was just from my recruitment background of the previous 25 years doing IT recruitment, and then becoming a disabled person myself and not able to find work easily. It was a struggle. It just seemed like a match made in heaven, and I am absolutely loving doing the same thing for Microlink.
It's interesting, isn't it, how that lived experience makes such a big difference. So you were already in recruitment, and you stayed in recruitment. You're just looking at it through a different lens. I knew nothing about recruitment,
really?
but a lot about diversity and inclusion, because that was my bag. But I wasn't disabled either, and like you, and like 83% of disabled people, I became disabled as an adult. And then suddenly it becomes a bit up close and personal. And I think, I need to do something about this. And that's why we only employ disabled people at Evenbreak, because we all have different lived experiences, but we all face barriers. So we understand the barriers, that our candidates face. And it's interesting that you talk about the recruitment process itself, because, as you say, I don't think anybody ever sets out to think, right, okay, let's build a recruitment process that is deliberately going to disadvantage a certain group of people because we don't want to employ them. And, I'm sure you have the same experience as me, that if you talk to employers, they'll say, well, we think our recruitment process is fine, but we just don't seem to employ many disabled people. And so it's not that people are deliberately doing things or not trying to make it better. But sometimes I think it's just going back to that lived experience, not really understanding what those barriers might, if people want to apply for the job, why don't they? And, why don't they just send us their CV, and why don't they just come to an interview, and why don't they just, and there's that kind of assumption that if somebody wants a job, then they'll jump through those hoops. But I think my response to that is, well, if you're going to carry on doing what you've done before, you're going to get the same candidates that you've got before. What we're saying is you need diverse candidates. You need to do things differently. What do you think, when you talk to employers, Tracey, what do you think are the main challenges that they face when they're trying to look at their recruitment process?
Do you know what? It comes from both ends. From the recruiters' end themselves, they tend to be young, fit, healthy people. And for a lot of companies, and I think it has changed, but for a lot of companies, they tend to be white. So you've got white, highly educated individuals who expect that only white, highly educated individuals who are preferably straight can go and work in the business. And of course, they follow the same mold. And British Gas did years ago. They did a referral scheme for their van drivers. And their van drivers had a mate they met down the pub who's very like them with a beer belly and all the rest of it. And they'd say, come on board, because they got a £500 fee for doing it. British Gas got to the point where they had white van drivers, so many of them that were in the mold of a fat white bloke who drinks beer, that they had to actually change their whole recruitment process, because these people were coming out with the same ideas, the same thought processes, the same methods of working, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to shift the knowledge of a recruiter to understanding what it's like to be a person of difference. So that could be a disability, it could be your face, it could be your color, it could be anything. But specifically around non-visible disabilities, for example, where they don't even understand them, to your senior bosses thinking, do you know what? This is a whole can of worms. They're telling me it works. It's okay. I've got other worries. We've got gas prices going up, fuel prices going up in general. I'll worry about that another day. And what I found happens that it's a sad truth that where people at the top of the organization change their mind is normally when their own children have a disability. It comes really close to home. They understand that their children wouldn't be employed by their own company, or where they themselves have a disability. Now, that could actually be simple as the CEO goes skiing, breaks his leg, comes back in a wheelchair. All of a sudden, all of the, the obstacles to the physical accessibility in a building disappear overnight because the will is there. So it's kind of like it's an apathy from younger people, I'm sorry to say, and it will wait till another day from up here until it becomes personal. And it's personal stories.
It's not seen as a priority, is it?
No, it's not.
I think I'm wondering if that's changing a little bit. I mean, for the sake of clarity, there's nothing wrong with white blokes with
no.
You just don't want an entire organization filled with them. And in the same way, you wouldn't want an organization filled with white women. You need a
mix is ideal.
That's the ideal. And what we tend to find, of course, is that things feed on themselves, don't they? So if you have an organization of people who all look like one thing, whatever that one thing might be, it's going to attract other people that look like that, because they think, oh, I'll fit in there because I'm like them. And then it just perpetuates itself. And that's the problem, isn't it? It's about stopping and thinking, what about people not like me?
Yeah.
And that's not always easy to do.
Well, if you're all in agreement, if you're all singing from the same song sheet, there's a real danger that you all think you're singing in key. And the reality is you might not be. And throwing the odd different changes into the mix. But more importantly, I think what you touched on earlier is the age-related disability factor. If it comes upon us all.
Anybody.
So we're actually doing a huge disservice to the businesses, to ourselves personally, and to our families. And we need to change it.
Definitely. And I think it's probably come a bit more to the forefront since the pandemic and since Brexit. And there's the whole kind of skill shortages, and we need to be looking in different places. Well, of course, the thing is, you have to do things differently in order to look in different places. And I'm sure you found the same at Microlink, but all of a sudden we're finding that employers are saying, oh, we need to look at this. And they're coming to us rather than us having to hammer on their door and say, have you thought about this? And that, no, as you say, we'll think about that think we're doing disability in 2048.
Yes. Yeah. No, this year is, we're black, or
next year it's and of course there's the whole intersectionality thing. So if you're a black disabled woman, which year do you belong in? Or all of them, or none of them, or which?
But do you not find it interesting though that although they are coming more to your site, although they are coming more to Microlink to get the workplace adjustments done, which is great, the announcement about the refugees from Ukraine, which is absolutely right. We absolutely need to be doing it. But all of a sudden, businesses are going, I want a refugee from Ukraine because they're going to be white and they're going to be non-disabled. Yeah. And I'm like, for heaven's sake, guys.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, let's help them. But what about your homegrown talent?
And again, it's looking at everybody, isn't it? We've always had refugees. You know, we had Afghanistan refugees. Recently, we've had Syrian refugees. You know, we should have been looking at the refugee as part of the whole mix again.
Absolutely.
You know? And refugees can be disabled, and they can be white or black, and they can be gay or straight. Actually, it's about talent, isn't it?
It is, but it's about if you make it as barrier-free. I mean, it's a really common cliche now to make it barrier-free, but if you open the process, if you actually look at what your process is designed to do, most times you will find that process isn't designed, it isn't fit for purpose anymore. It just isn't.
No.
You know, the AI that's coming up, unless you specifically trained it to be unbiased, will have an inbuilt bias, which is a scary option. You know, where you get to do the video before you go in, for even get invited in for an interview. I mean, the algorithms behind that, if they're not put in correctly,
and they've been built by people.
Yeah, they think that they're going to be really inclusive because they've heard that video interviews are a really good idea. They are, but a video interview on TikTok or on your blooming phone, do it like that. But AI is a real challenge. I think some of the assessment centres, unless you're actually assessing for the skill that's needed in the specific job that you're recruiting for, don't do them. They're a complete waste of money. The emphasis on people being a graduate or having a certain level degree. You know, we've got to look at the socioeconomic issues. We've got to look at the fact that poorer families, if they've got disabled children, they don't get the education. No. So why should they be left out when they really want to work?
And also, it's not just about that kind of moral side of it, is it? I mean, if you think of, say, two candidates side by side, and you've got, and I'm hugely stereotyping here, but let's say you've got young, white, straight, non-disabled man, brought up, gone to all the best schools, gone to all the best universities, private tutelage, father has friends in the city, so has done lots of unpaid internships. His CV is going to look incredibly impressive, and he'll have been trained to write really good CVs. And then you get another candidate who might be mixed race or a person of colour, who's been born in an inner city, has gone to the local comprehensive, maybe have battled through, I don't know, dyslexia or mental health conditions. Nobody in their family's been to university before, but somehow they've managed to get A-levels, and they've gone to a previous polytechnic, and they've got, you know, a 2-1. Actually, that person has had to demonstrate so much resilience, so much fortitude in order to navigate around all the barriers that they've faced. That person's CV will not look anywhere near as impressive as the first candidate's, but they may well be the best person for the job.
And it's been more open, isn't it? And understanding where people come from. I mean, I was talking this morning, to the DFN Foundation, Project Search, which deal with learning disabled people and people on the autistic spectrum, but at the lower end of it. So people that in the past had been living at home, never expected to go out to work. And these are young people that they really want to work, and the expectations of them, they want people to be excited to employ them. And they were saying to me this morning that for them, there was 4 key points that they wanted. One, for employers to let them do a video CV they were suggesting a QR code. I had to look it up, I'm afraid, but a QR code showing them doing the work in work experience. So there's a little video within a video, which I thought was a great idea. They're talking about, you know, working interviews, which I know we talked about unpaid internships, and they were becoming incredibly unpopular because employers were taking the mickey. But knowing the questions in advance is another typical one. As long as it's not, you know, a cognitive reasoning thing that shows that you could do a specific job, why not?
Absolutely. And
they're out on glass doors, aren't they? Most of them.
Absolutely. And we know that talent comes in all different shapes and sizes, and that the traditional recruitment process, well, actually, let's go through the recruitment process. I think it starts right at the beginning, you know, when a vacancy occurs or we're deciding to add a new role to the organization. At that point, we're thinking about job design. And traditionally, what we do is we bring out the job description that Fred had, because Fred's left and we like Fred. So let's get another Fred.
And it is Fred you're trying to employ. It's not the person to fill a job.
because we liked him. So that's what we want. We really want a carbon copy of Fred. No disrespect to any Freds who might be on the call. It's just that it's a name. But actually, we might have employed Fred 10 years ago, and things have changed since then. The pandemic has changed so much. So does every job have to be full-time? Does it have to be in the workplace? Does it have to be 9 to 5, Monday to Friday? I think we've got an opportunity here now to actually look every time a new vacancy comes up, or we're creating a new post, how can we really look at this job to make it as flexible and as open to whatever talent is out there as possible? So do we have to say you've got to be full-time? Not everybody wants to work full-time. This isn't just about disability, is it? This is about people.
Parenting, caring, responsibilities, all of that sort of stuff, isn't it?
What else?
Having the dogs at home. I think one of the things with job descriptions that always fascinated me is, in my day, we used to take them out the filing cabinet. Now you've got them on the computer, but they're very, very rarely updated, ever updated. And they never seem to be about the outputs. It's all about the input. So it's, you've got to have a degree, you've got to have done X, Y, Z, you've got to be able to type at, say, 40 words a minute, whatever it might be. The reality is, if I can produce the documentation that you want using speech-to-text software, do you care? I could be missing my 2 front limbs. Do you really care, as long as I can do the job? Yeah. But who has the responsibility for that? It's not the recruiters necessarily, because they're the ones that are looking at the talent that's coming through. Is it HR? Do HR have the time? Is there a role that's in between that companies are missing, perhaps? And hiring managers, I think themselves sometimes, we work with a lot of organizations who are, really keen, we talk to the strategic people at the top, the talent acquisition people, perhaps people like people who are on this call now. And the concern is that, actually our hiring managers don't always get this. Recruitment is a tiny part of their day job. It's not something they're necessarily trained in or comfortable with. It's something they have to do. And so it's quicker sometimes just to get out the documentation, bang the same advert out in the same places that we've done before, and we'll get the response quickly because we need this role filled like yesterday. And I wonder sometimes if it's hiring manager training that's needed. Oh, I think is that your fire alarm? Fire alarm. It's a practice. I'm not going to freak. It's fine. If you see smoke billowing in and me going a bit crisp, we'll expect you to go. I was going to say on the web boards, I would say use Evenbreak. I think it's a fantastic website. It's been built from the ground up, and it has got so many disabled people on it looking for work. It's a great place to go if you want that resource and you're being honest about getting the best talent in and the most diverse talent in. And I'm amazed and chuffed for you at the same time that you've grown it from you in your bedroom in London to 50,000 odd applicants now. Yeah, 75,000 I think we've got. Yeah, it's wow. Yeah, no, it is. And what I would say to anybody in the call, this isn't obviously a sales pitch for Evenbreak. No, but I think what we do know is that you have to work harder to attract disabled candidates, because disabled candidates will have had so much rejection in the past. Some of it will have been disability related, some of it won't, but they won't know which is which. And so, you become, when you knock your head against the same brick wall so many times, you become very wary about where you're going to put yourself. Am I going to put myself in that position yet again? And I think that for organizations who genuinely want to attract disabled talent, diverse talent, you have to do something different. And obviously Evenbreak is a great place to do that, but it could also be, any specialist job boards. It could be absolutely advertising in disability journals. It's also about what you write on the advert. Job centre, yeah, absolutely. But it's making people aware. That welcoming opening statement of, we welcome people of difference, whether regardless of race, sex, disability, etc., etc. But you also need to talk to them about making adjustments and explain what adjustments are. Because if you've got individuals that aren't aware that there's an access to work fund that can help them into work if they need things changed. For example, I've got access to work to, I've got a second monitor, I've got monitor stands, I've got a footrest, I've got a lovely ergonomic chair, I've even got an electric riser desk. So if I want to stand up rather than sit down all day, I can stand and work. And that was all funded by Access to Work when I started Microlink, which was fantastic. But through the recruitment process, I don't think, there are some that do brilliantly. there really are some great companies out there, but the majority haven't actually looked at how, if somebody says they need a BSL interpreter, they would cope with that, how they would cope with doing scripting for JAWS, screen reading for somebody who was blind. They don't, it would be a shock, and quite an unpleasant one for a lot of recruiters, to have somebody who came in after we've all been virtual for so long, comes into the office and goes, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
So it's building the trust with the candidates and making them aware that if they want to ask for extra time, if they're dyslexic, that they can ask.
Yeah.
And that companies are okay with that.
Absolutely.
It is that welcoming message. But it's also, I did do an audit recently, and oh my God, I obviously won't say who the company was, but the letter that they give with their offer letter, there's a health questionnaire in there as well, which you're not allowed to do pre-employment questionnaires. No. This is after they've offered the job, but it goes through to an OC health team if anybody ticks yes on it. And it says things like, do you think that you might have a disability? Are you under investigation for any illness that might affect your work? Truly, that face. Mine was like, huh? This is here and now. This is happening now in companies. And really, if I was giving companies any advice, legally and reputationally, they're absolutely buggered on that. Don't do it. Why would you do it?
And the thing is, it's not complicated, because what we suggest to employers, both in the recruitment process and when you're onboarding somebody after the job offer, is not to say, are you disabled? Yes, no. What do you need? Because that's such a stark question. And sometimes people won't want to say, oh, I don't know if I want to tell you that at this particular point in the process. But actually to say, and also people wonder why you're asking, are you asking that question so you can filter me out if I say, yes, I'm disabled?
Yes.
Whereas if we do it differently and we say to every candidate, we want you to shine in this recruitment. We want to see you at your best. What do you need us to do? These are some of the things we can offer. Then that makes it much more friendly, much more approachable, much easier to ask, because it could be someone who says, well, actually, I need to pick the kids up at 3, so don't give me an interview then. Yeah. Or I'm not really a morning person. Could you give me an interview in the afternoon? You know, it doesn't have to be disability related, but it does mean if you are disabled, it makes it easier to ask for some of those things without thinking, am I really exposing myself too much here? And again, on onboarding, we really want you to shine while you work here. We want you to thrive. We want you to be happy. What can we do that will make that happen? And that's for everybody. And often it will be about flexible working, or it might be about working from home sometimes, or coming in late and going home late so you miss the rush hour traffic, or whatever it might be. It's usually something fairly simple. But if we phrase it in that way, we want you to be happy here. You know, selfishly, because the happier you are, the more productive you're going to be. But what do we need to do to make that happen? And I think it's trying to get that across, that it's not a legislative compliance issue. It's how do we get people to really give us their very best, whether that's in the recruitment process or while they're working with us. And it's not hard. It's just thinking it through, isn't it, really?
But it's not even a long time to think it through, Jane. It just actually means that they need to sit down, take some time out, take 2 or 3 days out, and look at the process. And if they don't want to do it themselves, come to people like me, come to people like you, go to people like the ClearKit, whoever it is. It doesn't really matter. The thing is that they need to reassess it, because it's one of the most expensive things that you can do. It's a hidden cost within a business. The other end of what they're doing incorrectly, because if you don't set the scene when somebody comes into a business, when you're supposed to love them the most, if they're then not treating them well and giving them adjustments and supporting them and giving them the right environment, etc., they're falling out the other end of the business. Yeah. We're in the midst of the Great Resignation. We're in the midst of 1.4 million live jobs. Do you really not want to treat your staff the best you can? I don't understand.
I mean, it makes business sense, doesn't it? This is nothing to do with morals and ethics and pity and charity. This is about business. It makes
bottom line. It's bottom line. That's all it is, actually. I mean, we've got a great example of one of the big banks where the chief guy has 3 disabled children. And he is doing everything, turning over every stone to make sure not only is it accessible for your customers, it's accessible for your candidates, and then it's accessible for your colleagues. Yeah. And they're going to do well, and hurrah.
Of course, yeah. Because the thing is that disabled people don't live on islands. We all have family and friends. So if I go somewhere because it meets my needs, my family and friends are going to go there too.
Yeah. You're going to tell me, I'm going to tell everybody on LinkedIn. Yeah. It just, We are a community. We do share that information.
Yeah, and we're everywhere. It isn't as though we're in little ghettos. You know,
oh, we not? I
to
thought we were hidden over there, Jane.
That little under that little toadstool. You know, we can be any color, we can be any race, we can be any gender, we can be in rich, poor, anywhere. You know, and actually, we talk to people, of course.
Yeah.
So I also think it's not just about attracting people. You know, we talked about CVs earlier on, and for me, I think one of the big problems we have is how we assess talent, and we tend to, most traditional recruitment processes rely really heavily on CVs and interviews, those two things.
Yeah.
And we've talked about, you know, some of the problems around CVs, that actually what we're really looking at is past privilege, not future potential.
Yeah, absolutely, actually.
But I struggle a bit with interviews as well in terms of how we assess talent.
I think that, again, it comes back to the job description. You are actually checking if that person is Fred. You're asking questions to see if you are still Fred. Oh, you're still Fred. Great. We'll carry on along that line. Yeah. Instead of saying what we actually need, what the business actually needs is somebody who can do X, Y, Z. Can you do X, Y, Z? Oh, you can. Great.
Yeah.
You know, there's too much of kind of the personal and matching to what they have originally without any genuine thought about the person that you're talking to.
Yeah.
And the level. I mean, we mentioned the project search people earlier. There's different levels of skill required in different jobs throughout the business. Why are you looking for degree level people to do maybe some of the more pedestrian work within your organization? I don't think we can use blue collar work anymore, can we? We can't use it.
But whatever. Yeah,
okay.
I mean, you're right. You know, you don't need to be an Oxford graduate. If you're, in fact, they're probably not very good at front of house work.
No,
you know, particularly.
Absolutely not.
And I think, again, for me, interviews are really good at finding out which is the best candidate at blagging at interviews. And if you're interviewing for someone who is, you know, I think of some, there are very few, but, you know, if you're going to be a political commentator, you're going to be interviewed by the press regularly on your opinion on whatever's going on in Ukraine or Brexit or whatever it is, you have to be good at being interviewed. So a really good way to assess that person for that job would be to interview them and see how good they are at being interviewed under pressure. But for the vast majority of roles, being interviewed isn't part of your day job.
No.
So why is that a skill that we're testing?
That's really interesting. I'd never stopped to consider that, to be honest. But it is. I'm so sorry.
Some of our candidates, and I'm not just thinking about, you know, I'm just thinking about people generally, because we know that you and I are pretty extrovert and we're pretty good at, you know, I can blag through interviews. I suspect you're pretty good at blagging through interviews.
Maybe.
Doesn't necessarily mean that either of us would be the right person for that job, but it means we're more likely to get it.
Yeah.
Whereas I can think of lots of people I know who are introvert or who are socially anxious or who are nervous or who are autistic and don't really understand the game, because interviewing is a game, isn't it? It's just a game that we don't all know the rules to. So sometimes it's like, you know, being given a Monopoly set and some money and nobody tells you what the rules are, and then you wonder why you keep losing the game. And I think interviews are a bit like that. When I think, again, it's a bit like CVs. The people who present well at interview has no correlation to the best candidate for the role. It's just the person who's the best at interview.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's very much what you say about we're checking that you're one of us.
Yeah.
That culture fit. I hear people talk about culture fit.
Yeah.
And I wonder if I mean, we've at Evenbreak, we don't use interviews or CVs, but we're very much into culture add and into value fit.
What would you call culture add then? How do you define that?
For me, culture might be somebody, you know, somebody thinks, oh, well, they won't fit into our culture. If the culture is we all go to the pub on a Friday night with our partners, I'm not sure this candidate would fit into that culture, because they might be gay and they might not want to bring their same-sex partner to the pub in a heterosexual area or whatever it is. Or they might be Muslim and they might not drink, or they might be autistic and actually not want to socialize with their work colleagues outside of work, you know, whatever it might be. So that culture fit has nothing to do with whether that person's going to be a good person for the job or not. Whereas if you have a culture that is maybe a bit laddish or a bit, you know, too many women, that can be toxic too, or whatever, what you're looking for isn't more of the same. you're looking for something different that can add to that culture and make it more representative,
Yeah, yeah.
more, human, more real. And so you're trying to add to the culture, not just perpetuate the same culture.
That's
So
a
for
really
me,
interesting point.
it's about bringing somebody in who will say, why are you doing it this way? Because actually there are other ways of doing things. And then the rest of us who are all the same will think, oh my God, I never even thought about doing it that way. And actually that's what we want. We want people to be innovators and challenge us and say, just because you've always done it this way doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. Things have changed and maybe it never was the best way to do it. And so for me, it's not about culture fit, it's about culture add. And also we look at Evenbreak very much on values rather than culture. So I don't really care much about your socializing prowess or what your hobbies are, or but I do care about what you think is important.
Yeah.
And if somebody came to Evenbreak and they clearly have racist views or sexist views or homophobic views, they are never going to fit into Evenbreak, because our candidates are diverse, not just in terms of being disabled, but in every other respect that you can possibly think of, and a few more as well. So their values will not fit into Evenbreak, and we wouldn't employ them.
Which
so
makes sense.
That's really important. Oh, Pierre, hello, didn't know you were on the call. What do you think of culture interviews? Oh, I've not heard of that one. What's a culture interview? Do you know what a culture interview is, Tracey?
No, I didn't know what a culture ad was, so I'm learning something today. Thank you.
Pierre, can you talk a little bit more to us about what a culture interview is? Pierre's from Checkout. They're great. They're a great organisation.
I don't know Checkout. What do they do?
They're a huge, one of those huge global companies you've never heard of that do a lot of tech. So things like, when you buy things online and e-commerce sites and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
And they
do the back end of all of that.
And they're great. So apparently it's an interview that focuses on questions related to values. Yeah, exactly. And operating principles. So that for me, that's something, we don't do interviews, but we are interested in finding out what people's values are. So even within the disability community, and we only employ disabled people, there is, of course, a huge variance of values within that community, because we're just people.
Yeah.
And sometimes we might meet someone who wants to work for us, who has the kind of view that, well, actually, it's sad for all disabled people and we should be given jobs because we deserve it, and people should give us jobs because otherwise we won't get them. And I can see why people might think that, but actually you have to see it from an employer's perspective. And the employer is always going to look for the best person for the job. And also there's something very demeaning about you've got to lower your standards in order to employ disabled people, because the disabled candidates we have are premium candidates. They're better than most of your standard candidates, because they've learnt all of the skills and qualities you need to negotiate around the barriers that other people don't face. So Pierre, I think that focusing on values and the way that people work is hugely appropriate to do, because that's what you want, isn't it? You want people who are going to be sharing the same values, that are going to be demonstrating the values of the organization to all of your stakeholders, whether that's colleagues or customers or clients or partners or whoever it is. So I do feel that values, because those are things that are harder to change. I always think you can train people in skills and tasks. If somebody came to me, if we had two candidates and we needed them to use some software, and one had used that software before and somebody else hadn't, you'd think, well, the first one is going to be the obvious, you haven't got to train them. But if there's someone who turns up late all the time, lets people down, causes problems in the team, makes people argue with each other, is unreliable, the other person is reliable, really wants to work hard, wants to work with the rest of the team, wants the organization to do its best, but doesn't know how to use this software, I'm going to employ the second one and teach them how to use the software. Well, I'm not going to teach them because I don't, but somebody else.
But don't you think, though, the culture and values of the company have to be so clearly demonstrated, though?
Yeah,
because otherwise you've got a problem. I mean, we're similar to you at Microlink. I think something like 60% of all the staff have disabilities. We have trans people, we've got non-binary, we've got such a mix of individuals, but we're all driven by the CEO and his passion for disability and making it a fairer playing field. So again, it just makes our job fun,
which
might be a kind of irrelevant thing for a lot of people, but it's really important for me.
Well, people stay and they work hard if it's fun, don't they?
Yeah, of course they do. Of course they do. I'm happy. We sit here, we're doing at the moment the Shore Trust Power 100 nominations for people that aren't generally in the limelight, if you like, but the people behind the scenes that are doing the work. And there's some fantastic stuff that's going on. But I really would like people to be more honest, even if they don't do it openly, about the recruitment practices, and actually looking at it and saying, do you know what? It's no longer good enough to say, well, we get quite a few candidates through, and I'm sure some of them are disabled. That's fine. But to really be proactive, you don't have to tell anyone. You can do it completely sub rosa, make sure everything's really quiet. But do it, please, because there's still things like those 1980, do you have a disability? If so, I'm not going to employ you letters going out. I've seen it with my own eyes. And I don't want that to be in the workplace, because it's damaging for everyone.
It is. And I think it's interesting that, Pierre mentions culture, and we've talked about it, is that, there are organizations who will say, oh, we're an inclusive organization, we're an equal opportunities employer, and we welcome everybody, and but our website is inaccessible. Or you have to do a timed test in order to get to the next stage in the recruitment process. And those things, again, won't have been done deliberately. But actually, it's not good enough just to assume that what you're doing is good enough. You have to be consciously looking at, is there talent out there that we are excluding because our website isn't accessible, or we're using assessment methods that don't work for everybody. So it may be you have a timed assessment, and this is quite common, isn't it? Timed assessment as part of your recruitment process. But if you're dyslexic, for example, or autistic, you might want a bit longer to process the question before you formulate your answer. Or if you are anxious, the very fact that it's timed is going to think, oh, I can't do this because it's timed. Whereas actually, given freedom to do it, you might be the absolute best candidate.
And it doesn't fit into the role anyway. It's not actually achieving what they're looking to do.
Yeah, it's a bit like I always thought with exams at school. There's no time in your organization where you'd be asked to make a really important decision, but you can't look up any information anyway.
Or use your calculator.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't happen, does it? So
no,
it's about
not real world.
It's making it real, isn't it? And actually, and I think you were saying earlier, Tracey, about different ways of people demonstrating their talent.
Yeah.
If I want someone in another life, I'm patron of the inclusive skills competitions, which is for people who are young people who have very complex and profound and often multiple needs, but have skills, because everybody has skills, and may demonstrate them in different ways. And I remember, it's a very quick anecdote, but one of the competitions was around hospitality. And so I went to this, I was one of the judges, and I went to this residential college where this was taking place. And there's a cafe on site. And there was a young man with Down syndrome who greeted me at the cafe entrance, asked my name, remembered my name, told me his name, took me to a seat, again said, I hope you'll, and he came back a number of times during my visit. How are you doing, Jane? Is everything all right for you, Jane? And I remember thinking, and at the time, my two daughters were going through university, and they were doing, jobs to pay their way through university. And I'm sure they were doing them very well, but I doubt they were doing them as well as he was, because for him, this was what he did. It was his job, it was his career, it was something that was really important to him, whereas to them, it's kind of a means to an end. And I remember thinking, if I had a cafe, I would want him in my cafe working, not one of my daughters.
Wouldn't you? Yeah.
I'd want him. But if I was going to use interviews and CVs in order to attract that person, I would end up employing my daughters, because they would have, I'm going through university and I'm really good at writing a CV and I'm very articulate at interview. But actually, the person who's really good for the job, what we need to do is video him doing that job. And then say, okay, now which one do you want?
But there's a kind of snob factor attached to that, though, isn't there? You know, all of our people come. I mean, the civil service is, excuse me, all full of people from Eton. It just is what it is. But again, it's that madness thing you said. Excuse me, if you do the same thing over and over again the same way, you get the same results. And we don't want that. We want businesses to actually see the business benefit. And I mean, how many times have people done business proposals to show the return on investment? And that really annoys me, because ultimately you're talking about people. You're not talking about widgets. You're not talking about engines. You're talking about people who have lives and responsibilities and bills. Can they do the job? Can't they do the job? Can you afford them? If you can, employ them. If they need the adjustments, make the adjustments. Either use access to work or put your hand in your pocket, pay for it yourself.
Yeah. And usually it's really simple. I mean, we have, at Evenbreak, it's a kind of, we find the best person for the job. And then we talk about, okay, so how would you like to work? What hours would you like to work? Would you like to work full time? Would you rather work part time? If you'd rather work part time, that's fine. We can employ someone else to make it, it's kind of, and when would you like to work those hours? And all of those kinds of things. And I think, I have the best team on the planet, I definitely do. And I think it's because we have really gone for people's strengths. We're not interested in what university you went to, or even what jobs you've done in the past. We're more interested in what values have you got, what strengths have you got that you can bring with you, and let's really play to those. And often what happens, and I'm sure it happens in other organizations, is that you take somebody on and then very quickly you find out all sorts of other skills they've got you didn't even know existed.
Yeah, of course you do.
And so, people that we one of our employees, TT, for example, was employed as an account manager, and she was a brilliant account manager. But actually, what she's really, really good at is making videos and marketing and telling stories. So that's now what she does. And we have an account manager who's brilliant at being an account manager. And for me, it's about, if we want to survive, and we're doing really well as a social enterprise in a time when we should have really failed, we've actually doubled in size. What we need to do is make sure that we have the very best people for the job using their strengths in a way that works for them. It makes perfect business sense.
But without blowing smoke, that also comes down to you as a leader, because unless it comes from above that you're empowering the people below you to behave in a different way to get the best out of them, unless you're given permission to do that, a lot of companies can be really hidebound. They don't have the policies and procedures. They've not reviewed them. HR is still perhaps holding on to power that they don't need to hold on to, or in reality want to hold on to. Who takes the responsibilities of an organization for making adjustments to the recruitment process? Are your recruiters trained? Are your hiring managers trained? Have you got over that ick factor that people have about disability, that they suddenly think that they're going to have? And I'm using deliberately profound language like a cripple or a slit or somebody within your organization. There's still that feeling that they're less than, we are less than, because there is something not quite perfect. But none of us are perfect. This is what I don't quite understand. Who cares? I mean, my next door neighbour, he's over the road, I'm pointing over there, Peter, he's 33, he's got cerebral palsy. He walks on his backside when you're in his house. His arms are all over the place. He can't really talk. He's built his own computer. He's learned how to sail a boat single-handedly, and he's learning how to fly a plane. Now, I'm not sure I'd get in the plane with him. I'll be honest with you. I might not. But he does this in spite of everything else. He's done an MSc in computer science. Can he find a job?
I think he's done all that, not in spite of everything else, because of everything else.
You're right. Yeah.
Becoming disabled or being disabled almost makes you feel, because of the society we live in, I've got to be better than others to prove that I'm at least as good as others.
Yeah.
So I think
he's an astonishing young man, but I do feel deeply, what a waste of a human life.
Yeah, waste of talent.
He desperately wants to work, but he gets people phoning him up. And of course, he can't communicate. He needs a support communications person. Yeah. And at the moment,
those things can be organised. Those are easy,
aren't they easy? And
those are practical issues that can easily be solved. If you've got the talent there, the practical bits, you just come to Microlink and say, right, we've got this problem. What do we do? And you'll say, oh, there's a piece of kit here that'll do that. Or you can apply to Access to Work for whatever.
And that's it.
I'm wondering,
it really is that straightforward.
It really is, yeah. I'm just wondering, Tracey, for the last sort of portion of it, the people who I think might be on the call are probably not leaders. So if they're working in an organisation where, some of them I know will be working in organisations where the leaders are very much on board, and the culture is cascaded down and it's very open to new ideas and all of that. But not everybody has that luxury. So if you're in a situation where you are, and this is often the case, isn't it? You're the champion. How do people go about implementing better, more open and inclusive recruitment practices if maybe they're also having to battle against,
yeah,
managers who aren't really with it?
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes what you can do is you can do a very basic audit, just look at your practices yourself. You can get somebody from outside, but there's always a cost involved, nearly always. But what I tend to do is a little bit more of a disruptor, guerrilla kind of tactics, because I'm a bit more like that, is I will say, right, what I want to do is we've got some intern roles. Everybody in the company wants interns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say we're going to make 10% of them people with disabilities. So you're actually setting a target. And I kind of don't ask for permission. I always go with the ask for forgiveness role, because I know what I'm doing would be what the company would do, obviously, wouldn't it? The company wants to recruit good talent. So I've decided that I'm going to approach people like the DFN Foundation. I'm going to approach Mind, Employ, Evenbreak, look at all of the different areas that I know specifically work with disabled people and say, can you find me 3 individuals that can do this job? And then I'm going to put them through the process in a different way, because they're different applicants. And then I'm just going to present them to the people and say, hey, we've got some great talent.
And of course, what happens then at the end of that is that people start off with, oh my God, what have you done? And they end up with, wow, that was amazing. Can we have some more talent like this, please?
Absolutely. And I know one big bank, it started off with 10. It just wanted 10. And I'm like, okay, we'll find you 10. If that's the number you're going with, they've now got 350 that they want. Because everybody is coming, all the managers have gone, oh, my auntie's got that, my sister's got that, my mum
want some of that. Yeah. Why is that organised? Why is that part of the department getting all the talent? We want it as well.
And that's when it's so exciting. Yeah. Because people are excited then of seeing people of difference. You then get, I mean, Marks and Spencer's got some wonderful stories about employing people that have obvious physical disabilities. And they found that their stores increased their bottom lines by 20-25%, because all the families shopped there, all the other shoppers that came in and saw these visible disabled people went, bloody hell, Marks and Spencer's, good for you. There really isn't a downside.
And there's lots of research that shows that people are much more warm towards organisations that are open and inclusive, and obviously so. Jamie's
Why would you discount so many people? I don't understand it. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, quite. Jamie's put in the chat, I think disabled people like myself are used to being told what we can't do rather than being asked what we can do. And I think that's absolutely on the nose.
That's the crux, isn't it?
Because people do, and there's almost something happens in your brain. If you're a recruiter and you're looking for talent, almost always you're looking for, I wonder what this candidate can do. I wonder if this candidate can do this. And as soon as you hear that someone's disabled, well, they won't be able to do this, will they? They won't be able to do that, and they won't be able to do something else. And the whole emphasis changes on from trying to find out what somebody's strengths are to find out what they can't do. Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, you could write a dissertation on what I can't do. I can't speak Russian. I can't fly a plane. I'm not very good at tech. I mean, but it's not relevant, because I'm not going to go for the jobs that use the millions and millions of things I can't do. I'm going to go for the jobs that isn't
that strange? Imagine that.
And that's the same for everybody, whether you're disabled or not disabled. So, and we find, and from our own lived experience, but also our candidates tend to only go for jobs they know they can do, because they've been discriminated so often against. And sometimes it's almost the opposite problem, that our candidates self-select too well. Well, they wouldn't give me that job but you could do that job, with this adjustment.
That's a real problem, though, isn't it? Because they dumb themselves down almost. So they're doing the company and themselves no special service.
But society has done that to us, hasn't it? Society has done exactly what Jamie says, and has focused on, but that person can't walk, that person can't see, that person can't, but nobody looks at me and says that person can't speak Russian or can't service a car. And
I have a very short reply, which is very rude, which is just that when people say you can't do something.
Absolutely.
I mean, I work on the basis of, if I want to do it, I'm damn well going to do it. Please don't get in my way.
And if I'm going to apply for a job, I'm applying for that job on the basis that I know I can do this job. And I know there's some research about men and women that I can't remember.
That's shocking. No, it's shocking. It's men. If you've got 10 points, men will say that they've got 12 points of what they can do the job, and the women will do something like 3 points. So you add disability into that mix, and you're pulling the scoring down again.
Absolutely. So unless you feel as a disabled candidate that you can do everything on that job description, standing on your head with your eyes closed, you're not going to apply for that job.
Playing the banjo.
Yes, with your feet. Yeah. You're just not going to go for that job. So we're missing out on so much talent. And actually what we should be doing with every candidate, disabled or not, we won't know whether they're disabled.
Who cares?
Because most disabilities are invisible anyway, is find out what they can do. This is what the job involves. Can you do it? That's all I need.
And tell me how you would do it.
Yeah.
And what you need to do a good job with it.
And if you do it in a different way, that's fine. There are lots of different ways of doing the same thing. There's lots of right ways of doing things. There's not just the one way that we've always done.
There's some companies doing amazing things, Jane. You would have seen them. They come and they use you regularly. They come to us. They come to all sorts of disability charities. And you can see how well they do and the difference that it's making. And the only one that's come up recently that's given me a little bit of a qualm is the whole neurodiverse superpower kind of story, without perhaps understanding the background and the needs of the individual coming in to a business, that it wouldn't necessarily be just throw them in the office and they'll be fine because they don't have a physical disability. What do you think?
You might need to do things differently. Yeah. And I think now as well, with people being able to work from home more than they did, I think that's quite empowering. Certainly not every disabled person wants to work from home. Many like to go to work for the social side of it, just like non-disabled people do. But I think that now that we can, and we've proved through the pandemic that people can work effectively from home, that's opened the doors. But I still hear organizations who are saying, oh well, now the pandemic's over, as if it it went away, everybody can come back in the office again. But actually we should have learnt, I think, during the pandemic, there are lots of right ways of doing things. It doesn't have to be done the way we've always done it. We can work part-time, we can job share, we can work in the evenings instead of during the day if that suits us. I'm much better. I'm not a morning person. You've
never been a morning person.
Never been a morning person. I come alive at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm alive until about 2 o'clock the following morning, and then I kind of count me out until lunchtime. And that's not just about disability. That's just about me as a person. And I think that if organisations recognise that everybody works in different ways, and that's fine, and we can facilitate that, then everybody is working to their optimum. And what organisation wouldn't want every person within it working to their optimum?
I don't know. I think there's some simple asks out of and actions out of what we've been talking about in terms of, looking at the recruitment practices, looking at how you interview. Do you have to interview? What values you're looking for? What values you display as a company? And then just really training people so that they understand the difference between somebody who had to drop out of school because of a disability, but has gone on to do a degree in their own personal time, and somebody who was fortunate enough to be funded by mummy and daddy. It really isn't difficult. None of this is difficult. You just have to start.
Yeah, and I think it's just about, we've always been taught treat people as you would like to be treated yourself. And I think it's just about turning that into treat people as they would like to be treated. It's a bit more work. You've got to find out how they would like to be treated, but they won't be the same as you, that's for sure.
But all you have to do is ask.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think on that very positive note, that actually it's much easier than it seems. It's much less frightening than it seems.
Yeah.
But the rewards are so immense.
They're huge, aren't they?
That it's really worth looking at this stuff. So thank you, Tracey, so much.
Oh, thank you. No, it's lovely chatting.
I've enjoyed it. I hope that the people listening have got something out of it that you can take away. Even if it's just to go back and look at your own recruitment process and think, are there bits of this that maybe there are barriers I haven't thought about? Maybe we should be looking at this a bit more. And you may have people within your own organisation. You may have a disabled employee resource group, for example, who can perhaps do some of that for you, so long as obviously their workload is reallocated accordingly. But all of that kind of stuff, it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be complicated. But I just think it's really important to look at your recruitment process through fresh eyes. If it's something you've been doing for a long time, it's easy to think, well, this works because it's what we've always done. Just get some fresh eyes and look at it and think, maybe there are different ways we could do things. And on that note, thank you very, very much. Thank you, Tracey. A pleasure as always.
Thank you.
And if anybody wants to get in touch with me or with Tracey, just let us know at Evenbreak and we'll facilitate that happening.
Wonderful.
Thanks very much, everyone.
See you soon. Bye.